Welcome to Golf Industry Guru and the Gig Podcast, where we interview the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. On today's episode, you will learn some proven real-world solutions that'll help you and your team solve some of your biggest golf business challenges. So stick around for some tips, tools, and training to get you, your people, and your business powered on. Here's your host, James Cronk.
Well, hello, Gig Nation. It is James Cronk, and I am back again with another Golf Industry Guru podcast. And today, guess what? We are talking about booze. We're talking about booze. We're talking about pot. We're talking about gummies. We're talking about cannabis. We're talking about all kinds of things that can either create some fun at your golf course, but also as operators, managers, employees, boy, oh boy, can it create some challenges for you and your business. And we have the liquor expert of liquor experts, Mr. Bert Hick. I have known Bert for many, many years. He has helped me get licenses. He's helped me fix licenses. He has helped me solve liquor questions and challenges and problems. And Bert Hick and his company, Rising Tide Consultants, are actively involved in the liquor business, and in particular in the liquor business and the licensing business in Canada with the golf industry. Many of you would have come across Bert in some of the courses and some of the conferences. And it's my pleasure to once again have the sultry voice of Mr. Bert Hick on the Golf Industry Guru podcast. Welcome, Bert.
Thank you very much, James. I'm very glad to be here with you. And by way of background, I'm a bit of a golfer. I keep track of more about how many balls I lose than my actual score. And I'm a very social golfer. I'm playing with folks on this fairway and this fairway, wherever. But I love the game of golf. And in terms of liquor licensing, we love licensing golf courses. We find it creative. It's like licensing a hotel where you try and maximize your licensing capabilities through the various changes that have occurred in licensing over the years. My background briefly is I used to be the general manager of the liquor control licensing branch for the province of British Columbia. And my predecessor, Alan Gould, he was a golfer. I was a golfer. And a couple of my successors were golfers. So as a result of that, we made a number of policy changes that have really helped golf courses in terms of licensing so that you've got a lot more flexibility around the licensing of golf courses. One of the big first changes we made back in the early 90s was a licensing of the playing surface of the golf course. So you could have a takeout window, kiosks, and golf carts serving liquor on the licensing, on the playing surface of the golf course, and consider that as a licensed area. Then recently, in the last couple of years, we were successful in lobbying the government to include the practice areas such as driving ranges and putting greens. As a matter of fact, I think we've got about 3 applications underway right now to include those areas because previously they were excluded from being licensed. The other one we did a couple of years ago, like 3 years ago now, is a licensing of the pro shop. So that at a golf course in the off season, you got those hardcore golfers that want to go and play on a rainy day, but you don't want to have the bar and the restaurant open for business. But they got to go into the pro shop because they got to pay their green fees and whatever. But we can now license the pro shop so people can go and get a glass of wine or a beer or some cases a scotch on the rocks, whatever, before you go and play on a November, December day out here in British Columbia. The other thing we did was the government several years ago increased the flexibility for food primary licenses. In British Columbia, it used to be you had to order food to be in a food primary license. So you come in, you sit down, and you ordered a drink, that's great. But if you ordered another drink, the server would have to say, as folks were licensed as a food primary, you have to have a sandwich, you have to eat something. And it became known as a rubber chicken sandwich. But the government got rid of that. And so we've been doing quite a bit of work changing the licensing over away from liquor primaries to food primaries, because being a food primary gives you greater flexibility around minors. Means you don't have to have in food primary licensed minors do not have to be accompanied by parent or guardian and can stay there later. The other thing is we're finding a number of golf courses have become event centers. And so we're licensing areas on the golf course property, and some of them are very elaborate, where they've got an area set up where they do events. It could be a family celebratory event. It could be a memorial service. And where it's set up as an interesting area. Some parts of them are covered permanently. Some of them are just kind of a tent-type structure. The other change that we were successful on was getting the ability to be able to carry a beverage across an unlicensed area. And the other one we're finding some golf courses are doing, because they have large kitchen facilities and they have banquet facilities, they're also now applying for catering endorsements. So they can cater to events off the golf course property someplace else. So we're finding that quite intriguing. Now with COVID, it's interesting with COVID, and let's get into COVID. I'm sure you've got some questions here, but of all the licensed establishments in Canada, the only one where you can serve alcohol as well as smoke a joint is on a golf course. There's no other establishment's got that ability.
Really?
It's a benefit in some respects, because guys could be out there smoking a joint, having an edible, whatever, but also drinking a beer from the golf cart, because it's outdoors, it's away, and smoking cannabis is permitted. But at the same time, it sets up all those concerns around liability. Because if you've got a foursome of guys or girls and they're smoking and they're drinking, what do you got when they finish playing golf? And they come into your clubhouse, they have a few more drinks, and then they get in their cars and drive away. So you've got this whole host liability responsible thing. And but it does set it up, but it's the only place that you can serve alcohol as well as people can smoke a doobie.
Wow. Okay. So there's 4,000 questions in my head already, and I knew this was going to happen because this topic is so crazy and there's so much to it. But let me just break things down for one step at a time for a moment. So first of all, and I mentioned, we've got gig members all over the world really at this point in time, but a lot of the things we're going to talk about in this podcast, I want to make it relevant to Canada. And Bert, when you talk about a bunch of things that you're talking about, am I correct that maybe there might be some nuances and some tweaks, but are these things you're talking about, for example, licensing, expanding onto putting greens or the driving ranges or golf shops? I mean, these are things that can happen in any province in the country, correct?
Essentially. You've got to recognize that everybody in North America, the United States and Canada, went through a period called Prohibition. Back in around 1919, before the Roaring '20s, a Prohibition where alcohol was banned, but every jurisdiction in North America came out of Prohibition after the people voted to have access to the product that they were prohibited from having access to. Every jurisdiction came out slightly different, but the fundamental rules around licensing are the same. The fundamental principles are the same. And we find differences between provinces in Canada in some respects, between classes of licenses, age majority. Alberta, for example, is 18. Of course, the United States is still 21. I always found it interesting. In the United States, you can go fight a war, but you can't have a drink. But every jurisdiction came out of it a little bit differently. And every jurisdiction tried to put in place barriers after people voted access to alcohol to prevent people from getting access to the product they just voted in favor of getting access to, and put these rules in place and created a regulatory regime and a taxation regime around that. But there are nuances, but fundamentally the basic principles are there for the same for all golf courses. Some of the ones we have here in BC, like licensing a pro shop, I'm not sure every jurisdiction has that. But if they don't, they should lobby for it, because some of the golf courses, particularly on the lower mainland British Columbia and on Vancouver Island, it's very popular. It's just another added amenity for a golf course to be able to serve liquor and also reduce labor costs by not having to operate the restaurant or the pub.
So I want to talk about cannabis because I know you've changed your website and you've changed from a few years ago. When cannabis became legal, I know you all of a sudden got into the licensing issues around cannabis. I know you've been instrumental and involved in cannabis. And so before we talk about COVID and how that's impacted, I think the liquor regulations, it appears. Can you share with our audience what are some of the things that they should know? So, for example, like you just talked about guys smoking pot, cannabis on the golf course, and that is legal in every province, correct?
Absolutely. There's two countries in the world that have legalized cannabis on a national basis: Uruguay and Canada. Prime Minister Trudeau decided to legalize it. Every province put in place their own local criteria around it, but everyone has the ability to consume cannabis in an outdoor public area, walking down a sidewalk, on a golf course, in a park.
So right now, obviously in British Columbia, you can't smoke a cigar or anything outside because of the fire hazard. But fundamentally, it would be within the rights of the golfer then if they wanted to, on the first tee, light up a doobie and smoke cannabis, and no one could tell them otherwise. Is that correct?
Well, the golf course ownership or management could put in place a policy prohibiting the consumption of cannabis on the golf course, which would have to be enforced by the marshals and the staff at the golf course prohibiting it. They can do that.
And does that mean that you can also, I would assume that a cannabis smoking individual would say that's discriminatory if you allow cigarette smoking and cigar smoking on the first tee?
Yeah, and I'm not aware of any cases on that, but it's very difficult to enforce. Let's say four guys are out on the ninth, not the ninth hole because it's close to the clubhouse. Let's with the fourth or fifth hole, and somebody's on the tee-off block, and he decides to light up a joint and smoke it while he's walking down the fairway. It's tough to enforce. How do you stop it? It's the same thing as somebody having an edible, like a truffle.
Yeah.
Something like that. And of course, the other problem we have with golf courses is this constant battle of people bringing outside booze to a golf course. It's a constant battle.
I was hoping, Bert, in today's podcast that you were going to tell us how to fix that, because I don't understand how golf seems to be the only industry where consumers think they can completely walk into the facility with their own booze, yet they would never do that in a restaurant. They never do that in a hotel. You know what I mean? It's amazing to me.
Well, you pretty well have to search every golf bag. But the key thing we tell all of our clients is make sure you got policies and procedures in place, because if an incident comes up, if there's an issue, your best defense is due diligence. And Make sure you got a policy and procedures manuals. We work with clients to prepare these policies and procedures manuals for all types of licenses, whether it be serving liquor to a minor, over service, golf courses in terms of people bringing liquor onto the establishment. And we encourage people to post signs. So if it does happen and there's an incident, you've done the due diligence and your staff are trained. And the other thing, we find with golf courses, if, the guy's going around the golf course like the marshals, he sees a bottle of rye in the garbage bin at the 10th hole or whatever. Okay, somebody on this course has brought in a bottle of rye and they're drinking it. Look for product that they don't sell through their beverage cart, through their kiosks or the takeout windows. And you have to have your due diligence, and you have to watch for signs of intoxication because
we're going to talk about that. What I'm fascinated about, Bert, is I have this conversation with operators all the time. I am a huge fan, have always been a huge fan. I think it's one of the greatest inventions ever developed are the beer can stickers that clearly identify that we sell this beer on our property. It's got our logo on it, or it's got a saying on it. And when the beverage cart or the marshal or the golf shop staff or anybody goes around and sees someone drinking a can of alcohol that doesn't have a sticker on it, well, then that's not ours. And not only I explain to people, I go, look, not only are your sales going to increase because it makes it more difficult. Everyone, lots of golfers, not everyone, almost a Doug Ford slip up there. Many golfers bring their own booze or try to bring their own booze on a golf course, but many golfers will respect when they see the sign, when they know that the golf course has stickers on the cans, when they realize that there's policing in place, it'll be diminished, it'll be less. And you can pay for those stickers in a heartbeat just by saving the alcohol that goes around it. But the other story that I always tell people is look, I'm dealing right now in the golf course that I manage with the lawsuit. And I can tell you, we don't sell bottles of Fireball on the beverage cart. And when the golf cart's tipped over on top of the customer and he's suing us for, a bad designed golf cart path, well, and I have a picture of an empty bottle of Fireball that fell out of his cart. That's him bringing his own booze to the golf course. At some point, that's going to help our case when we're standing in front of a judge. And so when you talk about those policies, Bert, what are some of the things when you work with clubs that you find clubs don't have? Like what are some of the examples? Like you just mentioned, serving a minor. The employee obviously serving it right and all that kind of stuff. Obviously having that documentation, but what are some of the other types of documentation and templates around alcohol that you think every club should kind of have?
Well, they need to have a comprehensive policy procedures manual that covers everything around the sale and service of alcohol. It's a service to minors, your ID checking policy, outside liquor. You've also got to make sure you're not over serving. And this becomes important with golf tournaments, where quite often the sponsors of a golf tournament include alcohol beverage companies, whether it be beer companies, wine companies, and you pull up at a hole, and this one's sponsored by a brewery, the next one's sponsored by a winery, the next one's sponsored by a scotch maker. And you add all that up, combined with the booze they're drinking, what do you got? And what are you ending up with? And
I want to stop you there. I want to ask you a question. So with regards to outside alcohol being brought to tournaments like that, so from suppliers, are there not some regulations? I mean, I've always told people there's regulations around that, and that we don't let outside alcohol come in. There's the whole concept of tasting, the whole but you come across these tournaments that for 30 years they've had a beer sponsor and they've got a bucket just where guys are grabbing and girls are grabbing drinks out of some ice. It's not being controlled by someone that has serving it right. It's not being monitored. They can grab 3 or 4 or 5 if they choose to. What's the guidance you give clubs that get into those circumstances, those situations from a legality standpoint?
Well, first of all, most of those events are fundraisers for an organization, and they would probably de-license the golf course. In other words, temporarily suspend the liquor license for the golf course for that one-day tournament, and they get a special event permit to allow the outside liquor to come in. The organizers of it would take the special occasion license out. So, for example, I used to be on the board of directors of the British Columbia Hospitality Foundation, which raised money for people in the hospitality industry that needed financial help as a last means of support because of illness or accident. And so what we would do is have a golf tournament at 2 golf courses, one on Vancouver Island and one here. And we would temporarily suspend the license of the golf tournament, of course. We would get our own special event permit. We also had to make sure that people serving the alcohol at the hole and for the event had serving a right. And we also had to make certain that alcohol was brought in, taken to a hole, it was poured, it was served in sample sizes. But then after the tournament's over, that alcohol is removed from the place, and the alcohol does not get mixed into the regular bar inventory of the golf course. And you're ready to ask me a question.
Well, my question is it fair to say that if you don't go through that process, like if a club doesn't go through that process to de-license yourself for that day, that otherwise you're breaking the rules of your liquor license, correct?
Well, no, you can do it if the golf course was going to provide the service, but the golf course would have to buy the alcohol from the supplier. So let's say a major brewery. Yeah, and then so a major brewery is going to be a sponsor of a tournament, then that golf course has to provide it and serve it and make that available. And so for a golf tournament, it might be only one brewery that's a major title sponsor, and their beer would be everywhere. But you'd have to be bought by the golf course through their license and their license number.
So, and I apologize, I'm jumping over because we're going to come back to templates and documents, but I find this fascinating, and I've always found this topic fascinating. So, Bert, is it when you talk about the Wild West, you talk about history and tradition. I mean, we talk about golfers bringing their own alcohol to the golf course. Every time I get involved in a club as a consultant, generally speaking, one of the things that we come up against are these tournaments and fundraisers that, for 20 years, the beer company has been a sponsor and they're, handing it out on the first tee. And I try to explain to them, we can't do it that way. That's, are there other industries other than the golf industry where they have these kind of historical traditions that don't follow the cross the T's and dot the I's and that are loosey-goosey when it comes to alcohol? It just seems to me that alcohol in the golf industry has just been a bit of a Wild West show forever. And it's trying to put those policies in place that makes it a struggle because you're trying to convince your board or your members or a sponsor or a fundraising team committee and saying, look, I know you've been doing it for 20 years that way, but we can't do it that way today if we want to follow the rules of the road. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fairly fair. Hotels and stadiums also have the same problem. Because they will often get approached to host a fundraising event. It could be a dinner, it could be a dance, or it could be a concert, and there's a sponsor. So who is going to be the beneficiary of that event? If it's a charity, nonprofit society, a foundation, then they can take out the license, they can suspend the license, and they can bring in whatever product they want under their responsibility. So, for example, in Vancouver, there's a stadium called Rogers Arena. They have had fundraising events there for various major foundations where a table of 10 goes for $10,000. But they have sponsors. And all the proceeds go to the foundation after the event's over. Same with hotels; they get into the same situation. So they also have the similar situation where they have to figure out if we're going to do it by way of a special event permit where we suspend our license for that area, for that evening, for that event. And sometimes we find this at hotels with wine tastings and that sort of thing. So golf courses have companions in this issue, and you just have to look at each event and decide how you want to approach it and the re-involvement. But you've got to make certain that the people who are on a golf course, who are out there on the 8th or 7th hole pouring a product, is not serving somebody who's intoxicated already and who's just bobbing and weaving and staggering around. And you've got to make certain that they're in control of it, and things are served in the sample sizes, and jurisdictions have control of that size as to how big a pour it's going to be, as opposed to just loading people up. Because I have seen golf tournaments where I participated and I played in, where at the end of a hot day, people are sitting at the post-tournament banquet and they're just toast. They're ready to fall asleep. Yet they still have to drive home from someplace out in Maple Ridge or someplace.
Yes. Well, we've all seen it, and that gets back to the liability. And obviously, and we talked about some documents and templates, and obviously people hire your company, as I've hired your company to help with some of those policies and some of those liabilities, and that's obviously what we're trying to do is reduce risk. What are the calls? What are some of the calls you get, Bert? So when clubs call you up, you mentioned a few examples. Is that kind of what when people reach out to a consultant, a liquor consultant, or a liquor or cannabis consultant, whatever it might be? Is it in the licensing side? Is it in establishing safety and rules and policy and templates? Probably all the above. But what do you hear? What kind of work specifically for golf course do you find is what's happening these days?
90% of the golf course calls we get are people trying to maximize their licensing opportunities in today's world recognizing that in the COVID world and post-COVID world, there are some opportunities that they might not have been taken advantage of. They need to, like patios are huge, special event areas are huge, having outdoor dining areas are huge. It's sad to say it in one sense, but it's also been, COVID has been good for the golf industry generally. And the golf courses up here have had last summer, phenomenal growth. It was very difficult for me to get some tee off times because of the popularity of golf, because you can be outdoors, have a recreational experience, consume alcohol and food on the golf course, even though the indoor dining might be closed because of COVID, the outdoor part is operational. And people trying to maximize how they can reduce their labor costs, have efficiencies, effectiveness in terms of their operations, but play safe. But most of it is on the licensing side. And we've done a number of applications recently where people just want to make sure that they are serving their customers, giving them a good customer experience and maximizing their potential for their business, whether it be banquets, whether it be through reducing labor costs, that sort of thing.
And would it be fair to say that COVID has created less red tape when it comes to liquor licensing and requests and those types of things? Like, do you, I mean, we get these emails all the time from the Liquor Association or the Hospitality Association talking about how the governments are allowing patio extensions, or they're allowing you to sell alcohol for home delivery, or they're reducing the price, so that we're all getting the same playing field. I mean, all these things are indicative of trying to help the hospitality industry survive in an incredibly challenging 25 months. And so are you, I assume in your day-to-day, you must be experiencing that legitimately when you're dealing with various different government branches. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We, when COVID hit full on in March last year, a group of folks in the hospitality industry, and in British Columbia, it was Ian Tossis of the Restaurant Association, Jeff Gennard of Abel, the National Golf Course Owners Association, regional directors. They all worked hard to try and further the opportunities for their industry, and the government responded to the hospitality industry, whether it be liquor primaries, food primaries, golf courses, to try and help them out. And so some of the things we saw here in British Columbia particularly was, first of all, wholesale pricing, so that the hospitality industry buys liquor at a wholesale price. And secondly was the ability to sell liquor with a meal to take out. So a golf course, somebody could come into the golf course, order a meal, and take it home with them, and they could also take liquor with them. Interestingly enough, the government has not defined a meal. What is a meal? We have this issue where people are walking out of a place with a case of beer or 3 or 4 bottles of wine and a bag of chips or a French fry. But they haven't yet defined a meal. And when I was general manager of Liquor Branch, we messed around with that a little bit. And the best thing we came up with was a meal was any multi-component food item, and condiments don't count. But with nachos, we always had a problem because we're sure, okay, nachos, is the cheese a condiment or is that part of it? So we always wrestled with the nacho part. But a hamburger, a hot dog, that's a meal. Salsa and chips, no, that's not a meal. So, but there are those benefits that came out of it. That patio extensions is huge. We've been doing a lot of those for not just golf courses, but hotels and restaurants. And people like that outdoor experience. And and of course, we've got a fairly mild climate here in Vancouver Island and the Lower Mainland. But a lot of these patios are popular, and people enjoy that sort of little bit of distancing, but also being outdoors and fresh air.
Bert, are you familiar with TopGolf?
Yeah.
So my ignorant perception or my data is incorrect, but my understanding was that one of the struggles that TopGolf has had in coming to Canada, and I could be wrong, has been overcoming some of the liquor license challenges that don't exist in the States about activity and the food and the bar kind of atmosphere with the driving range experience. And once again, this was pre-COVID, so maybe things are more flexible now. I mean, I'm taking my boys to a movie tonight, and I remember that, being in the movie in the States when I, years ago when I could walk into the theater with a bottle of beer in my hand. And it's only been a few years, I feel like, in Canada, where there's now segregated theaters, obviously, but blending kids, in the States, you walk anywhere with a bottle of beer into a movie theater or activities like that, or TopGolf, you've got kids besides adults, et cetera, et cetera. In Canada, we separate that quite a bit, and we still had, the red line and the food primary and the liquor primary and all those different areas. Is my information, do you think, incorrect with regards to how that can happen nowadays? If you're a driving range operator and you want to get alcohol out into your driving range and food, hopefully, to create your own version of the TopGolf experience, is that a lot easier today than I know it was many years ago?
You're talking about an outdoor experience, TopGolf.
Well, TopGolf, I mean, outdoors in that there's the fourth wall is outdoors, and that there's, but it's surrounded by, two walls at least, and by some cement. I mean the driving, whether it's a driving range or whatever it might be. Yes, I'm talking about an outdoor hitting balls out into the grass. Yeah, no, we just licensed one, and in British Columbia. Because golf courses are considered a recreation center where minors are permitted, unaccompanied, and so 4 kids can go up, 4 18-year-old guys, and that's going to be a really good golfer. That's when you start, 16, 17, 18. That's when you start hitting balls. And they can go out and they can play golf. They can't drink, obviously, but they can be playing on a driving range, an outdoor golf driving range experience, whatever. And the guy next to him is, 55 years of age, and he's having a beer. So that is allowed. You can do that. And I think that the TopGolf concept, the other one I'm familiar with is the indoor one. And I think that they could license that as a liquor primary license. And with a minor's endorsement, because it's it's a golf thing that also might have some other interactive sports involved. It's to some extent like a concept like Cineplex has, called the Rec Room in Edmonton. We got one in Toronto, right downtown in Toronto, where it's licensed, where you can go in, play all these virtual reality interactive games. You can also drink, but minors can be there as well. At BC, it's a little more challenging because we have these 2 classes of licenses, food primary, liquor primary. So, there's some tweaks to each jurisdiction, but the TopGolf concept and that sort of thing can be done on a driving range. And as I say, we just licensed a facility with that type of capability here in BC. Awesome. Getting back to kind of employees and training and serving it right, and even, what is the you go into a club, maybe you see the staff afterwards sitting at the bar having a drink. What is the liability for the owner operator? Is the employee, as soon as they're off shift, on their own and just treated like a normal customer once they're out of uniform and everything else? All that
absolutely.
Stuff, right?
They finish their shift, let's say at 10 o'clock at night, and they want to stay at the establishment and have a drink or two. They can do so. I would encourage them to take their name tag off if they have a name tag, and but make it clear that they're off shift and that they're there as a customer and not as an employee. Now, the interesting thing about staff drinking is we have had some cases where a liquor inspector has gone into an establishment and has seen a bartender, particularly, take a sniff of a product and take a sip of it. And one hotel in Victoria got written up for that because a customer was complaining about a Scotch product and saying it just didn't taste quite right. So the bartender just took it, sniffed it, and took a sip of it, and the liquor inspector said, "Bingo, gotcha. You're drinking while on shift." Okay, give me a break.
Yes.
And it is common practice for a bartender when they're doing a mixed drink, let's say making a Vesper, to take a straw, put your finger over the top of it, and just taste it, just to make sure it tastes right, the mixture's right, and all that. That's allowed. But where they're drinking on the job, and we have had cases where a bartender is working away and he's got a full beer behind the bar that he's just working away on. Well, that's not allowed. But staff, after work, they finish their shift, they can document, they can sit there, but I take your name tag off just so that if the liquor inspector comes in, it doesn't appear like you're doing that. We've also had the same thing with strip clubs where exotic dancers will get off stage and then they'll be in their next to nothing costumes and they'll be sitting talking to customers, and they're not supposed to be intermingling with customers. But if they go back to the change room, get changed, and then come back out in their street clothes, then that's okay.
Well, we're not going to delve too deep into that topic in Golf Industry Guru, but I think the lesson learned as well is that when the staff are sitting at the bar, make sure they're paying for the bill and not drinking for free. That's the other thing. But at the end of the day, it's a liability, and these things are all liabilities. And if you're in this business long enough, having a staff issue with alcohol, having a customer issue with alcohol, having theft with alcohol, all these things happen. They will happen. It's just a matter of time if you run a restaurant or run a club long enough. So Bert, getting back to kind of, if I may, just kind of, we were talking about liability and operators and your work with clubs. So one of the things when you go into a club, are there any things that surprises you anymore about the way clubs and run their alcohol business, or where you think that there's still room for improvement, whether it's inventory, whether it's safety, whether it's documentation? If you could leave our listeners with kind of here's some things to go check on, what would you, if I was a potential club saying, why would I hire a liquor consultant and how can you help my business? Just share with us some of the things that you're asked to do and that you help golf clubs improve upon.
Yeah, and it's a good question. We have one client that owns multiple golf courses in British Columbia, and they asked us to go out and do an audit of their golf courses to make sure they're compliant. So it was a two-day effort. And we went into their establishment and just checked them from top to bottom. And one of them was really totally on side. They had good policy and procedures in place, and they had everything in place that they're looking for. The other one had a couple of minor tweaks. But usually when a liquor inspector comes in, whether it be your regular liquor inspector or sometimes police officer come in, they're looking for some basic things. But first of all, they want to make certain that you got your liquor license and the current liquor license, the one that's up to date, that hasn't expired yet, and the floor plan's posted someplace so they can see it and they know it's current and accurate and valid. And they also want to have a copy of the approved floor plan as to where you can serve liquor. And yes, identifies where you can serve liquor, where you can't serve liquor. If they see people standing out in your parking lot by their cars drinking beer, they're going to have a little concern. The second thing is every jurisdiction pretty well has some form of what we call serving it right here, or right serve in other jurisdictions. Of the staff have to have taken the serving it right program or staff alcohol beverage service training program, and they want to see a binder or a list of all the employees, their names, and their serving it right numbers to prove that Joanne or Susan or Ted or Tim over there have a serving a right certificate if they're working the establishment. Most establishments also have what we call alcohol sense material or social responsibility material. Take it easy, go slow, don't drink and drive, this sort of stuff. The liquor branch loves to see that sort of stuff around the bar area. Years ago in the 80s, it was about fetal alcohol syndrome with a lot of the bars up in the interior of British Columbia. But it's more take it slow, take it easy, and promoting social responsibility around drinking and driving and that sort of thing. The other thing they wanted, and this gets to your question, James, about inventory. The liquor jurisdictions are very anxious to make certain that licensed establishments are buying their liquor from approved sources. So in British Columbia or Ontario or Alberta, they want to make sure they're buying their liquor from the government and they're paying the taxes on it. And so they want to see the liquor register. They want to see a binder or a file folder that's usually for about 3 or 4 months old, sometimes longer, of the receipts for their liquor purchases, so that they wanted to track from their liquor register to a certain bottle of vodka or gin behind the bar, they can trace it. And it's not a case where the golf course just went down the street to Joe's private liquor store and just bought 1 or 2 bottles of a really expensive product. They want to make sure it's coming through legitimate government means. And that's important because they want to make sure there's no illicit liquor in establishments. And it gets a little tricky sometimes because let's say you want cucumber vodka, Moscow Mules, Olympics are on or something like that. You want to feature Moscow Mules, you want cucumber vodka. Well, finding cucumber vodka in a government liquor store is tough. But there's some private liquor stores that sell it. Just like in downtown Vancouver here, we've got some high-end bars who want to have a particularly high-end quality vodka or Scotch drink, where getting it through the government system, you have to buy 2 case lots and it takes time, where you just go down to a private liquor store, put down a credit card, and you get it. Mm-hmm. And there was an issue several years ago in British Columbia where there was a raid done on several establishments, got quite a bit of press attention, where there was a lot of illicit liquor had been bought that way in establishments. The other thing that the liquor authorities want to make certain that on your liquor menu, it shows the prices, the sizes, and drink strengths, so that you have that clearly available for the public to know what the prices are and what the strength is of the alcohol. And then there's some other things we do audits on. We make sure that the signage and emergency exits are clear, not blocked, and the exit signs are lit. If they made changes to any licensed areas, we check to make sure that the floor plan of what's licensed and approved matches what's there actually now. And then sometimes we've had a situation, not so much with golf courses, but with other ones where we said, this used to be an open space, but yet now you got this wall in here. And that sort of thing. We also make sure it's not so much for golf courses on issues like overcrowding. It's more of a pub issue or a nightclub issue. The government here prior to COVID was operating a minors as agents program where they would send in minors into licensed establishments to see if they could, these minors were engaged by the government on a contract to go in and see if they could essentially entrap a employee into serving him a beer. And there have been several noted cases of this where there's one at a stadium here and one other one at a liquor store where the minor went up. The server just made the assumption the person was over 19 years of age, poured them a glass of wine, and the liquor branch inspectors were right there saying, "Gotcha." And the thing, for some establishments like a major stadium, it's a $7,500 fine. That's not a big deal for that. But if it happened again on the same calendar year, it's a 20-day suspension of your liquor license. So that'd be 20 hockey games or 20 concerts without beer, which would hurt. Yes. So we make certain that their staff are really drilled onto asking for ID and checking ID, and that pertains to liquor stores. We haven't had any of those cases come up against golf courses at this point in time. But the one thing you have to watch on a golf course is where dad is playing with his 17 or 18-year-old son. He gets 2 beers. Here, son, have one. And we had a music concert where he did the licensing, and a guy bought 2 beers from at the outdoor music festival. And he turned around and gave one to his son, and the liquor inspector just happened to be right there. Bad timing. then we also suggest to make certain that your staff and whole team have a good working relationship with your inspectors, the police, and they know how to get in touch with these people. We had one hotel where a liquor inspector came in around 10 o'clock at night on a Friday night. The bartender was really busy, and the liquor inspector said, "I want to see your liquor register of your liquor purchase." And the staff member didn't have a clue what he was asking. Just said, "Hey, buddy, I can't deal with this right now. I'm busy mixing drinks." So the liquor inspector got a little agitated. They ended up having to bring the food and beverage manager, who was off that night, into the hotel to get him out of his office, the liquor register. So we also make sure that we also suggest that you have regular staff meetings to know what's going on, particularly around things like golf courses with tournaments and events. If it's a long holiday weekend coming up, there's going to be a busy weekend on the course. And again, if we highly encourage having policy procedures manuals, and we prepare these for people based on the local circumstances and the generic information. But the other thing we tell people is if you do have an incident or an infraction, whether it be serving a minor, intoxicated person, or whatever, you make certain you've got an incident log, and you put into that incident log every detail you can, the weather, the circumstances, what happened, who said what happened, because you might need it for the defensive due diligence. So we have this document, and we'd be glad to send it out to any of your people who are listening to this thing free of charge, because it's the sort of things that you want to have for successful inspection and get along with the liquor inspector. But
Bert, that is fantastic.
But I'm just going to say that add to that, with a golf course, you have this, this perfect storm situation where you got the combination on the golf course of outdoors, freedom, booze, and cannabis. And so at the end of the golf game, what do you got?
Yeah, you got a recipe for some potential trouble. That's what you got. Yeah. But and then like you said, I mean, it's about having process and systems and training and safety, and that's fantastic. Bert, I know you do some work all over. How can people get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to connect with you, to learn more, and to maybe have you help them expand their patio and implement some templates?
Well, the best thing to do is either give us a phone call here in Vancouver at 604-669-2928, or email me at bert@risingtideconsultants.ca, or visit our website, just Google Rising Tide Consultants Canada, and we'll pop up. And be glad to give free consultations, advice, and see if we can get a golf course from where it is now to where they want to get to, whether it be on licensing, enforcement, whatever.
Fantastic, Bert. I didn't even get to half the questions on my list, but we'll do it again, because there's so much. It's such a great topic.
Yeah, it is. It's a really fascinating one, and I hope to see you on the golf course soon.
You bet, Bert. I appreciate it. Thanks for being our guest. And ladies and gentlemen and Gig Nation, thanks for listening to this Golf Industry Guru podcast. It's been all about booze and pot today, but we wish you all the best. And as we like to say, we will see you on the inside.
Thanks for listening to the Gig Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and mostly that you learned a few things that will help you improve your business. Join us next time as we continue to bring you the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. Thanks for listening.